Steam's NextFest is going on this week, and it's been a lot of fun playing a lot of different games that are, well, new, demos, exciting. I guess we'll find out which really come to fruition. I took some time this week to play some games with V, and we have some thoughts on the games we played. Let's go over those now. All right, V, so we took a look at 4 different games realistically, and the number one that I think you and I were both most excited for and kind of most let down by was Enshrouded. We ran into a lot of technical difficulties while playing the game, but the gameplay I thought was very fun. It reminded me of Valheim, parts of V Rising, a lot of the games that you and I have played a lot together over the last couple of years. What excited you about this game walking in, and what was your biggest letdown?
I don't know if I would actually say I found Enshrouded to be disappointing. It was more the experience was disappointing because I wasn't able to spend as much time in the demo as I think as both of us had been hoping to. As Merck alluded to, we had some technical issues, and for me in particular, I couldn't go more than about 10 to 15 minutes in the game without getting a hard crash. It seemed like any time I did a repetitive action, I was just crashing to desktop, and repetitive actions could include shooting a bow, which tends to be kind of important in survival games.
A little important to have combat.
So while the demo was disappointing from that perspective, I am still excited to play the game itself. I think it had, at least from what we could see, I'm interested to explore that world. I think that's one of the things that Enshrouded did so well, in the demo at least, is dropping you in and you can just see all of these things out there around the world. Large structures, the towers. So I am excited to play the game. I just wish I could have had more time with the demo to experience the game. But yeah, I mean, what were your thoughts overall?
Realistically, I'm kind of in the same boat. I thought that some of the world building and story that they had really interested me. One of the biggest problems I probably had with the game, though, was it felt like they tried to, a little too hard to shove Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom gameplay style, or like even little features into this game. They had the same stamina bar system, they had the glider system, they had the climb the towers to explore the map system. It was all part and parcel stripped right out of those Zelda games. And then on top of it, you had probably the only thing that really stuck out to me was the actual Enshrouded mechanic, the mist itself. Without that mist, I would have felt like we were playing Valheim with a Zelda skin. Realistically, that's what it felt like to me. Did I enjoy my time there? Yes.
I was going to say, is that a bad thing though?
No, but from what I saw in trailers and gameplay and everything like that, I was really kind of excited for more of like this new style, creatively different narrative and creatively different gameplay towards the builder crafter survival game like Valheim, right? And instead it felt like, oh, I'm just playing multiplayer Breath of the Wild with a building mechanic, which Breath of the Wild kind of had.
So I mean, is it more just expectations going in were different? Because for
Yeah.
me personally, I don't think I came into it with, this looks like it's going to be an entirely new thing, aside from, you know, kind of what they're touting as the ability to minutely craft or build with their system that allows for a lot, or seems to at least allow for a lot more freedom than in games we've seen like Valheim and things like that. But for a completely new survival experience, that wasn't really the expectation I had going into it. So in that regard, I wasn't disappointed. I think, I don't know, the idea of trying to, like, I saw somebody do a comparison or saying that this is a Souls-like survival crafter, and I thought that was a interesting note. And the idea behind that being that there doesn't really seem to be a linear path in the game. You're dropped in and you can theoretically kind of go wherever you want to, right? If the enemies are too strong there, then you know, back out, don't go there, visit it later. I don't know if I feel like that's a very good comparison. I don't really like how often Souls-like is thrown around. I can see that, but to me that's just kind of, okay, it's open world and they're not really guiding you to a certain spot. I don't know, the big thing, or the biggest takeaway I have is, or with Enshrouded, or the biggest question that remains for me is, what's the point of the building? And you and I had kind of talked about this before. They're touting and really pushing how creative you can be in your builds. And if it's creative for the sake of creativity, hey, that's great. I think that there are a lot of players who are going to be interested in that. But what is the purpose of spending 50, 60 hours on building your optimum base? Because right now, at least what we saw in the demo, there doesn't really seem to be a mechanical reason in the game for that building, right?
Yeah, I think that the demo is very, what I'll call short-sighted, excuse me, where there isn't a whole lot of depth. Realistically, it's kind of just the intro sequence, and it's like the first 8 hours of the intro sequence, because like we didn't even finish realistically the last bit of it. We were supposed to like fuck off to this area all the way up in the northwest, and we didn't even make it there because of technical issues and our time getting reset, everything getting reset. That was another thing that we ran into with the game's demo, was everything getting reset by like 2 hours. So all the progress we had made, we had to redo. But there was some really interesting things with the building, but I also felt it lacked a lot of depth, and that could be just how early in we were. With Valheim, you get a lot of depth from the beginning, but it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper with new materials and new things you can do. With Enshrouded, it felt like we were kind of expected to just be like, oh, make a house, make a village, right? And one thing that I'll say is that, and this is just where my brain took it to, is I wanted to build a village based on how the gameplay seemed to be. As you leveled up, you got more territory to build in, which is very like V Rising. But you also have these people that you're saving or bringing back to life, reincarnating, pulling them out of their matrix pods, whatever it might be, and bringing them back to your camp, and they're workers for you. There's the blacksmith that we ran into or had for the majority of our playthrough time, and having like this idea of the village where, oh, the blacksmith's over here with all the tables that matter to the blacksmith. It's not just a corner of your McMansion castle or whatever it is. That's his space, and you can make it look however you want, and everything can be a little bit different per person or for your use case or whatever. The building kind of didn't do it for me though, because it seemed like, oh, you have to make all of these materials that aren't just the base materials you pick up on the ground just to give a different facade to your building. But I didn't run into anything like editable or changeable where you can upgrade that over time. It felt more like, oh, the building is the main part of the game, but we didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that. I didn't spend enough time with the actual building system to have the opinion that you did. I mean, the idea of the NPCs that you are rescuing, and then each one of those NPC crafters needing their own that is an interesting thing, right? And I think that will lead to some interesting building possibilities. As you said, like, hey, here's the blacksmith, and the smithy has all of the things associated with that. Maybe you get an alchemist at some point in time. I think that frames the idea of village crafting in an interesting way. Ultimately, I'm gonna hold judgment on that until we see the full quote unquote early access release. For me, it's more of the, okay, and we're making a lot of comparisons to Valheim, but I think
probably the closest game to compare it to, but unless you want to go Breath of the Wild, like I said before.
Well, and I don't know if, yes, probably the closest game to compare it to. I also think arguably a game that, you know, you could say does it very well, if
True.
Not maybe the best out there with what we have right now. Ark and Icarus. There's a lot of other comparisons that you can make in the survival crafting genre. But in Valheim, one of the main incentives you have to, you know, build a defensible area like your home is because you get raided. They have the events, and it incentivizes you, like, okay, hey, no, we do need a wall, or we're going to build ditches, or we need, you know, towers or ways to hold off these things so that what we build doesn't get torn down. And we just haven't seen that yet in Enshrouded. And I don't think, you know, it doesn't need to necessarily be a copy paste of that, but it's what is the outside of, hey, I need a blacksmith, here's his hut that has, you know, 2 tables that the blacksmith needs. and here's the alchemist's hut. What is the incentive to, build that, to make a home instead of just hey, here's the check in the box for like progressing the story? And we just didn't see it yet.
I had a thought about this after we had talked about it, and you just reminded me of it. The story leads to you're rebuilding a society in the broken lands that were your home previously. That's what these whole pods are, and where the characters come from, and where you go find people, right? I wonder if they're gonna lean into, we're rebuilding a nation and we're taking back our lands from the Shroud. Like that could be why we're building a village here, and as we explore further, we build another one, and we get more people, and we're rebuilding a country or a civilization or something like that, which I think could be a good way to like kind of encourage the building and the growth and the change over time. But it doesn't give a gameplay reason, right? Much like you're saying, it doesn't give that like, hey, we're getting raided by these enemies, or there's dragons flying around, so now we need to build with stone instead of wood, or whatever it might be. We haven't seen it yet, and that's part of the problem with some of these games is, go look at our Valheim time. We've got, 200, 300, 400 hours in Valheim, and that's 2 playthroughs. There's only so much you're going to get out of an 8-hour demo for something in this genre. Am I excited to see what happens next? Yes. Am I really, really, really waiting for like 6 more coats of polish and their drivers and everything to be running a lot better? Also, yes. It was a fun time for the first probably like 4 to 6 hours. That second or third day that we played, it hurt, and we ended up stopping.
Yeah, is it a game that I'm still going to leave on my wish list? Yeah. And will we probably pick it up on launch and play? Yeah, I would assume
Absolutely,
so.
Yeah.
Am I hoping for a lot more, not necessarily depth, but one, I'd like it to be in a playable state. That would be super cool. Because it is an early access title, maybe that, that polish, that kind of depth that we're talking about may come about as the game progresses, or as, they move closer and closer to a actual 1.0 launch. But it's ultimately, it's doing some interesting things. The shroud mechanic is neat. Having the time limit on you in areas that you have to go into in order to help. It's also kind of weird because, just talking about the shroud mechanic, the game very much wants you to go into the shroud to basically clear out the wells. But once you clear the well, the shroud doesn't go away.
Right.
Which I thought was very odd. What I expected was, the first one that we did was, okay, hey, you clear the well, this opens up new areas of the map.
So, I have a thought about that, and again, I think it may be either A, I'm completely off base, or B, it may be that you're building towards a final boss in these areas, right? And we only know a fraction of a corner of Zone 1. That's all that the demo was. And you have to kill or take out 3 of those wells or 5 of those wells or whatever it might be to clear out the shroud, and then the final boss comes down, and then you go, okay, I'm moving over to XYZ continent now, or I'm going to float off to this island now, or whatever it might be, like the next area, the next progression point. So
you're thinking that the loop is kind of going to be clear the wells, clear the final boss, and then quote-unquote final boss, zone boss, we'll say. And then once the zone boss is down, it clears the shroud in that area?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay. I could see that. I think from a gameplay perspective, there's some opportunities with the shroud that would make base building more interesting. And kind of cribbing from the idea of raids or things like that, it's like, okay, hey, once the sun goes down, the shroud rolls in like fog. You need walls to hold it back, or braziers, things to light and protect you from the shroud. And if you don't have those things, hey, you are not going out after dark because you're in the shroud. Or, the opportunity to build in the shroud maybe, because there are unique resources that you need from the shroud, right? So I think that there's the potential, like the opportunity there for some interesting gameplay mechanics around the shroud, aside from just go into shroud to clear well, and then you don't really interact with the shroud other than that, right? But yeah, I don't know, we'll see. And as we've said, very limited demo, 8 hours. And for us, we had significant technical issues that really didn't allow us to fully explore in that 8-hour period.
All right, so we did play 3 other games. Let's jump over to our time in Foundry, which is probably the second longest time, or maybe even the longest time that we spent in any of the demos over this week. You and I have spent, again, Survival Crafter, but you and I have spent a lot of time in Satisfactory, which is probably the Valheim to Enshrouded like equivalent, right? It's the nearest comparison. Foundry I found to be a lot more, happy is the wrong term, but cartoonish, fun, silly, playful is the term I want to go with there. A lot more playful version of Satisfactory, where this game was very Minecrafty, it was very cartoony, it had a lot of the things that Satisfactory does, and the building and just kind of the development and research and all that, but I found it lacking in a lot of quality of life or overall ability for completion or to have meaningful growth. It seemed more like I'm standing in this one spot and I'm bringing this one material in and it does something for me that's ephemeral. It's not like you're getting new weapons, you're not getting new ability to go after new enemies or anything like that, or build trains or planes or whatever it might be. It was like, cool, here's new bag space and here's your next metal and here's an upgrade to your power system. Also, the upgraded assemblers don't actually matter, it's just a little bit quicker. What is your take overall? And that was a lot of word vomit. What is your take overall on Foundry?
So before I get into like my overall take, I have a question for you, because you made the comment on I'm kind of standing in this spot and the gains I'm getting are kind of ephemeral. I mean, you could argue that Satisfactory is kind of the same way, but to your point, I don't feel a lack of meaningful progress when I play Satisfactory. Whereas in oh my gosh, Foundry. Yeah, my brain kept wanting to say Factorio. In Foundry, it did feel very like, cool, well, we unlocked the next thing, now we build the next thing, right? So how does Satisfactory do it right and Foundry feels like it's lacking?
It's a really good question, and I think it has more to do with the world itself. So Satisfactory has a lot of what I would call like traps. It has enemies for one. Foundry, we didn't run into any enemies. There was nothing. There was no weapons. There was no survival mechanic or like resource mechanic, really. It's just you are here. You as the player require no fuel or water or food or health. There's no enemies coming at you. It's literally just you're here to build a base and drain this rock of resources, and that's it. Satisfactory plays with that idea and they poke fun at it a lot of the time. Now, one of the things I'll say about Foundry is it either feels really, really early, or they are specifically playing to graduate Minecraft players out of Minecraft and into Satisfactory. Because like the sound effects were very cartoonish and kind of overbearing in my opinion, even like the stepping and walking Foley work, and I think that might just be a sign of how early the game is, but I mean, we'll have to wait and see. And that's kind of going to be a recurring thing with these demos that we're talking about, is we'll have to wait and see. We don't know when these might come out or what might happen. Go ahead.
I was going to say at least for Enshrouded and Foundry, there's no current release date. For Don't Die in the West, I think that comes out a month.
Yeah, like November 9th.
Yeah, which...
And I think Gangs of Sherwood is pretty quickly after that, too. Or around that time.
So that also has a release date of this year?
Yeah.
And, well, I mean, we'll talk about those games when we get there. I mean, overall, with Foundry, it was fine. Mm-hmm. It was fine. Like, that's all I can really say. Like, the Satisfactory doesn't really lean into the idea of you are under threat, but there's enough of it where, like, it makes exploration interesting, right? Like, going into a cave in Satisfactory and, oh god, spiders, like, that will never not be a oh god, spiders moment.
And hate those things.
At one point in time in Foundry, when you were working on something, I just fucked off into the wilderness. because I wanted to see the other biomes. And it's like, okay, well, they exist, but there's nothing there. Like, there's no creatures. There's just more dirt.
Right.
Yeah, I'm interesting to see what Foundry's progression path really looks like. Because if it's only, hey, build increasing science packs for no other reason than just getting some type of research, right?
Right.
I'm not really sure what the impetus for going through that is.
Well, so here's my other point, is that this game is supposed to, like, it really felt like it was a combination of Satisfactory and Minecraft, right? Both of those games have, like, threat and things walking around,
some type of outside pressure.
Right.
Right.
Or even a story. I don't know that Foundry's story is necessarily there. They have the gameplay loop, but we don't know why we're there. We don't know why we're robots and we're there. We have nothing. It's just go build a base, and that's the demo. I mean, and that's completely fair. Am I still interested in this game? Yes. Does it need a lot of work before it's going to be a 200-hour game for me? Yes.
I think just using the Satisfactory comparison, like, Satisfactory's story is kind of non-existent right now, right? But it at least hangs off of the, hey, send shit up the space elevator, right? It gives you something tangible that you're working towards. It's like, okay, I need 10,000 MacGuffins to shoot into space. Got it. What's the most efficient way? I mean, for me, that's, what's the most efficient, cleanest, effective way that I can make 10,000 MacGuffins, right? And make something that looks aesthetically pleasing to me while doing it, right? That's the fun in Satisfactory for me. And that kind of also leads me to my, not biggest complaint, but like serious gripe with Foundry. The way I fucking hate their conveyor belts in Foundry.
Oh, I loved them. I loved the fucking minutia you could do with them, but I want to hear your point before I counter.
It's not so much the minutia that you can get in Foundry for the balancers. Like, that is legitimately, that is a neat way to handle that. The lack of splitters, mergers, elevators killed me, because you are effective, like, you have to build on a flat plane. And not only do you have to build on a flat plane, because of the way the conveyors work, you are incentivized to have all of your conveyors coming in from one direction, basically running in tandem with all of your crafting things, right? So the most efficient base layout is just one long line.
I mean, that's kind of the point of a production line.
Okay, but you could say that, Satisfactory doesn't incentivize you to do that.
Oh, God, no. But so I would argue that Satisfactory basks in the chaos. Like, you can do these perfect, symmetrical, straight line setups of everything with elevators and different floors and, like, the mass storage crates and all that stuff.
Yeah,
you could
beautiful.
build that. Yeah, gorgeous, right?
And then you do what you do, and it's just this nightmare.
I love my nightmare fuel fucking conveyor belt systems. Don't worry about it. But I would argue that there is more opportunity to do more beautiful setups in Foundry than there are in Satisfactory.
Ooh, hard.
But
okay.
This is very, very early access alpha bullshit, right? So we have the perfect straight line cube system. Everything is a square. Everything is perfectly straight lined. Each one of the machines that you're feeding into has multiple slots for input or output, whatever way you want. There's on like the research stations we were looking at, there was 6 of them, or there was 3 per side, so there was 3, 6, 9, 12 inputs or outputs. You could go fucking bananas with this setup.
I mean, they're doing some
beautiful.
They're doing some interesting things, right? I guess it's the lack of verticality.
Well, it's funny that you bring up the lack of verticality, because one of the last things we did in this game was we found the mineral rock, and we had to dig down Minecraft style to get to it. We never set up a line for it, though. I mean, realistically, the only line we would have is the slopes. We could slope our way back up and out of everything.
Well, and
not ideal, but a system that works.
True. And I guess you could use the slopes. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's not aesthetically pleasing to me, so I don't want to do it. I mean, overall, like just, kind of round up impressions.
Yeah.
Game played fine. It's very much Minecraft, Factorio, Satisfactory. It is very cartoony in its sound effects and aesthetics. I'll be interested to play it when it comes out. I don't think it's a game that I would have hundreds of hours in, though.
Yeah, and one thing to remember is that this game, again, really early access, and Satisfactory is also technically not live, if I remember correctly. It's not a 1.0 yet, right?
No, their 1.0 is supposed to drop, I believe, this year, actually.
And how long has Satisfactory been in EA? 3-4 years?
Yeah.
Foundry's got plenty of time, and I really think that Paradox is known for that, like, really deep spreadsheet level game, because they're the creators of Hoi, Stellaris, like all of these, like,
all those 4x. Yeah.
If they bring that level of depth to a game that looks like kitty crack Minecraft, bro, I'm in. Like, and they throw Satisfactory on top. Let's go. Do they need a lot of work on the actual, like, upgrade systems? Yes. Are the bones there though? 100%.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's also, I don't want to run down the punch list. There are just some quality of life things that I really felt were lacking. It's out right now, particularly in just, variables on how much machine is inputting, outputting, what efficiency is it running at. Like, it was very difficult to track down on, not conveyor belt, but manufacturing bottlenecks. Which
I mean, it was all visual feedback, but it wasn't like data feedback, if that makes sense. Like, you could literally see the lines and say, oh fuck, this is running poorly.
But as factories exponentially scale, right? Because what will happen, right? As you need to make more complex MacGuffins, the factory is just going to get larger and larger and larger with, significantly more inputs, outputs, and being able to quickly analyze, hey, where there are problems is a very nice thing, but super early access. So we'll see what comes.
One thing I will say, and I know we're trying to get to the next game. One thing I will say is that I don't know why I liked it so much better, but there was something about the power system in Foundry that I really, really enjoyed compared to Satisfactory. And maybe it's just because I can't do electrical math to save my life, let alone regular math. But the way that the scale was showing everything, and it was like, cool, this one thing can max output this. It wasn't like, hey, we're capping, oh my god, we're capping. It was, cool, it's slowing down, it hasn't shut off everything, go build something. We're like relegating power, like we're moving it around based on what we have. I liked that versus, oh shit, the system shut down, scramble.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that power all runs through the foundations instead of having to run like power lines, that was like, okay, that's nice, right? It looks cleaner. I actually like that you'll throw a breaker in Satisfactory and everything shuts down, because you are punished for not appropriately planning. And I don't mind that, right? I don't know. It also makes for some interesting gameplay moments. Oh god, Factory 3 is down. What went wrong?
Dude, I wish that I had the ability to stream when we were playing Satisfactory last, because there was some shit, man. And I am excited for next year's run, because I know there's going to be a break in time where you and I are scrambling for a game. Satisfactory next year is going to be sick. The
caveat for that is Satisfactory needs to fix their fucking pipe dynamics, because all of your power is shutting down because, well, pipes just don't pipe anymore. That is frustrating.
And that's one thing we didn't see with Foundry is we saw that there is water. Is there liquid dynamics? Is that something we're going to have to worry about and move toward?
Yeah, or is it just, hey, binary, pipe in place, things flow, right?
I actually kind of want to switch up the order that we're going to talk about the next two games. Because we're in that survival crafter mode. A lot of the games that we played through this week, I want to round that out with the last one that we played, which is Don't Die in the West. Cowboy hat smiley face, as the emoji at the end of their name always shows. The multiplayer wasn't available, unfortunately, for this demo. there was a lot of demos that we ran into that the multiplayer wasn't available for. But this one in particular, I did not really enjoy as a single player experience. It was not my cup of tea. With the survival crafters and that kind of thing, I really like a multiplayer game. And I know this is a sin to say on the internet, but I'm not a huge fan of the Stardew Valley, like, build a farm, run a farm, single player type experience. It's just not for me. Which is where the single player of this game really felt like it was leaning into. I know that is more your speed. You might have different opinions, and I'm curious to hear about it.
Yeah, we discussed it last night after we kind of got done with our time with it. I could see this being a single player game that I would play. I am a Stardew Valley fan. And the game is cute. It's cute. Your little cowboy is cute, and little horses that don't have legs. I mean, nothing has legs. The animation is cute. Sound design I thought was great, actually. For a game that isn't a shooter, it had a great reload sound effect. And unfortunately, with this game, I again ran into some game-breaking bugs where after, I don't know, about 2 hours in the game, I just had to stop my playthrough. For whatever reason, I could no longer build anything, and my faithful steed disappeared off the map, which made exploration challenging.
So I looked it up because we were talking about it, and I just want to point out real quick, since you were talking kind of like about the faithful steed and all this stuff, one of the weirdest things about this game is the art style. It's 3D, it's kind of the asymmetric, but it's Fisher-Price Little People. Like, that's what it looks like. There's no legs on anybody. They just kind of hobble around. And maybe that's what took me out of part of this game. That's all I got.
I didn't know if that was a end of thought or...
That was an end of thought.
Yeah, I mean, overall, though, I think either as a single-player game or a multiplayer game, it'd be fun to go through. I mean, you've got the hook, you got to get the farmstead or the homestead up and running again before the train comes through, or you lose Grandpa's farm or whatever else it is, right?
It's Uncle Howard to you, sir.
Excuse me, Uncle Howard. And the building seemed fine. The setting is go out and deal with cattle rustlers. I had fun with it before game broke and could no longer play.
Yeah, a lot of these demos are demos, right? They're super early access or super early builds of games. We ran into a lot of issues with these three games in particular. And I'm not really sure how to judge that. You and I come from a time where demos were burned to a disc, right? We got them in magazines or in a cereal box or whatever it might be to try out games. I don't remember ever playing a demo for a game that was quite as finicky as the three demos we've talked about so far.
I think it's kind of part and parcel with Steam's early access system, right? I mean, there are thousands of games that hit EA that are unplayable. These are dev studios trying to get a demo out there to take advantage of the press and publicity around whatever the next NextFest is.
Right.
With Enshrouded and Foundry, really, I was like, that's disappointing, but whatever, because they don't have release dates.
Right.
The next two games, it's like you're supposed to be releasing in a month.
And to not have multiplayer, to be as broken and the game just ended like it did for you.
Yeah.
You and I trying to figure out those fucking fences for 3 hours last night.
Well, and for me to get a bug, this is a game about rebuilding your farm, and I have a bug where I can't build anything anymore.
Right.
And it persisted after a exit to desktop. That is a game-ending bug. Hopefully it's just present in your demo.
Hopefully,
or you figure that shit out before you go live in 2 weeks or a month or whatever it is.
I think it's November 9th, so 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know. With that, it was the most kind of hopefully your actual launch is a little bit smoother.
Right.
But ultimately, game cute. I'll probably pick it up when it's on sale. If we play it single player, and if we decide to do it as a multiplayer, then I think we'd have fun with it.
I think we would too. I did enjoy my time in it. Like you said, the reload sound for the gun it had no right to be as good as it did. It was so physical. It was so good.
It was very chunky.
It was so chunky. Kind of the shooting mechanics were interesting, a little weak, but for that kind of game, you don't need anything that special. The amount of damage that shit does is a little less fun, but in a true, like, you're in the Wild West, you are trying to survive. If you get shot, you're fucking dead. It felt good. It felt like the punishment was there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up. Like, it was harder is not the right word, but more punishing than I expected. Like, the first time I got hit, I was like, oh God, I'm going to die. And with the aesthetic and, you know, the cartoonish, as you said, like the Fisher Price, that kind of balloon animal 3D shine on things, it wasn't really expecting that.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't expecting some of the danger or even some of the things that just kind of came up in the story. Like, you meet the first girl on your farm or whatever, the first person, and she's like, oh yeah, I haven't eaten in 4 days. I'm just gonna sit here and continue starving until you bring me food. And I was like, that's a little dark. Like, you're out in the Wild West, there's just like coyotes and rabbits and shit, and you're just like dying here waiting for me. And it was a funny joke because it was, oh yeah, Uncle Howard told me to sit here and wait for you. So I did that. But I was like, man, that's a little dark for how cartoony and cute all of these little characters are.
I think that's before we move on to the last game we're talking about,
sure.
The limited bits of story that we saw, I thought writing for the game was actually really good. The interactions with some of the little meeple that you had were entertaining. You had some entertaining, like, conversation choices. That is something that I, will look forward to in the full release.
Right.
Because it was, like, well written. I thought it was genuinely funny at times.
Yeah, I enjoyed the little bit of time I did have with it. I wish that I understood kind of how the mechanics were meant to work a little bit better, but again, that could just be an EA thing. And the other thing that I'm realizing that we should probably talk about with some of these demos is these demos might be old. Like, it might not be a super new cut of the game.
New build.
Right.
Yeah.
Take everything with a grain of salt, I guess, but if we like the bones of something, it might be worth it in the future. The last game I want to talk about, and our last game played in NextFest, is probably one of the standouts to me, just because of how finished it felt and how I wasn't really expecting it. Like, I had heard about this game previously and was kind of like, oh, it's, it's a game. Fine, whatever. But when I came up at NextFest and we were looking for a couple more games, I watched the trailer again and I was like, shit, we should try this. And that game is Gangs of Sherwood, which is based on the Robin Hood story. I kept saying that it was very Dishonored-like. It had that, like, Magitech, like, darker feel to a lot of things that didn't really fit in with the main story. But playing through it, it felt really good in that, like, brawler mechanic and the team-based, like, Left 4 Dead, Vermintide, Revenant, or is that what it's called? Remnant from the Ashes? Revenant from the You know what I'm talking about. You know
and now since you've mentioned it, I cannot tell you the name.
It's Remnant. I'm pretty sure it's Remnant. And they just had a second one come out. But it's got that vibe where it's a little bit harder. It's combo. It's more Souls-like to me for what they were trying to do. It's like 4-player Souls-like going through a dungeon crawler type thing. Didn't expect it. I expected to play it and be like, cool, it's a Destiny game, or it's a game where you're shooting shit. After we played through it, I'm like, that's kind of an instant buy. Like, I'm really, really excited for that game now.
Yeah, I went into it with no expectations. You mentioned that you wanted to give it a shot. And I was really surprised by how polished the game was.
Agreed.
Game looked great. The environments looked great. I expected it to be more along the line of like ARPG, kind of skill-based. Hey, you've got your 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever else that might be.
Exactly what I was thinking as well.
And got into the game, and it's like, oh no, this is combo-based. And that's appears that's actually the progression loop, right? That as you level up your character or get whatever the currency du jour is, you use that to unlock, more and more advanced combos or harder hitting combos or things like that. And so, doing that on mouse on keyboard with, okay, it's 3 left clicks, 1 right click. It still worked great. I think it's definitely a game that lends itself to controller support, though. I feel like that would just be a little bit smoother, but I don't know. But yeah, I went through a dungeon, or I'm calling it a dungeon, like through the one mission that or not one, because there were 2 anyway.
It was the intro, and then there was one actual like story-based mission, and that mission I think was part of, based on the system that they had up, it was like mission 3 of Act 2 was what we ended up playing.
And so, I mean, we went through that mission. It took us around 40 minutes, which was honestly longer than I had anticipated. I was thinking more of like the quick, drop in, drop out, 15, 20 minute type blitz through type thing. And there was a lot more depth in the mission than I thought. Like you have multiple kind of side objectives. The first run that we had, we failed just because I don't think either of us expected, like we just didn't really have,
crazy.
And then after that, it's like, okay, learned a little bit more, went through, visuals were great. The mini boss fights were okay. Mini boss fights, like mechanically weren't that interesting. They were just chunkier, right? But the final like boss fight had a couple of interesting mechanics. You had some AoEs that you needed to dodge. I thought it was fun. I would absolutely pick up the game, and it's not something that it's like, hey, I want to spend 8 hours grinding this, but hey, let's spend an hour or 2 and run through 2 or 3 missions. Yeah.
Right.
Easy buy for me with what we saw.
Yeah, it kind of like Remnant and a couple other games that we've played in the past. It tickled that MMO itch for me. I don't know, like you and I still play MMOs. I played World of Warcraft for 20 years now. You've played WoW for a long time. You played WoW, I should say. We both played Final Fantasy 14. Both played many others in there as well. And both of us were raiding a lot. And this game gave me that dungeon run, that raid, like scratch. I haven't played an MMO legitimately in a couple years now, a year or 2. I miss that feeling. And this game gave me that, like, that it's not quite MMO-like, but it's more like Destiny, where you get your team together and you're going to run through this, mission or dungeon or whatever the hell you want to call it. And at the end, there's the boss fight, and you have to use mechanics. You have to think about it. You have to understand, okay, I'm going to try to run the aggro on this thing so you guys can do damage from the back. And we're going to dodge these AoEs by hiding behind the crystal or whatever it might be, right? This game could really scratch a huge itch in, like, a hole in my life for the MMO raids, because I do not want to spend the time trying to grind and gear up and raid lead and call out and all that shit ever again. I don't want to do that. I am beyond that at this point.
And just real quick in talking about kind of like the mission that we ran, I think it's important to note that, so currently in the game, there's 4 classes, we assume, right? Based off of what we've seen, all of the missions are locked to 4 players. For the mission Merc and I ran, we actually did it as 2 and were successful. I mentioned it yesterday. I wonder if there is, a scaling difficulty there, or if, it is designed for you to be like completed with a party of 2. You could just do it significantly faster with a full party of 4. And the 4 classes, they do seem to be, pretty unique in what they can bring. There are certain mechanics in the missions that can only be interacted with by certain players, or the 2 archetypes, I guess. The 2 archetypes being skinny or fat, I guess. Or I guess skinny or strong. And that was interesting, right? It gives individual classes kind of their own thing that they can do in these environments. And just based off of the one mission we ran, like, I am legitimately interested to see what are some of the other environmental things in later missions, and, what are the character interactions look like there. So yeah, had a good time with it.
Yeah, one thing about that is I think that we've brought up Vermintide a couple of times in a couple other games, but we tried Vermintide a while ago, years ago at this point, and the difficulty was beyond punishing, especially for having less than a full party.
Yeah, you have to have, well, I won't say you have to.
Right.
But unless you're a glutton for punishment, not taking a full party was not a good time.
In this game, I'm hoping that there is scaling difficulty, because this game had good difficulty, I feel, for where we were and what, like, our understanding of the game was. I'm not a big Souls fan. I don't like getting my shit rocked for 5 hours on the same boss. Again, we're MMO players. You and I have served our time with that. We've done cutting edge raiding before. The difficulty of being able to get something down while still having to learn how to do it, I'm great with. Really am excited for how this game can play. One thing I will say is I'm more surprised that there weren't CPU controlled or like AI controlled teammates. I'm surprised it was just 2 players, because the story of Robin Hood and all this stuff and some of the characters that would pop up and talk like in dialogue boxes, not there, right? Like the character itself is not there. They're talking to me, but there's not an AI controlled, person running around or anything like that. It's just you two. Go have fun. Bye.
Right. And so I was going to mention that. It's especially interesting that you couldn't pull in AI or, AI companions or whatever, because you have the option of running the dungeon in offline mode where it's a full AI party.
Right.
So it built it. It's just, you either have to choose to play in online or offline. And if you're offline, it's effectively a single player game.
Correct.
Right? Which I appreciate that they're offering that to players, right? If they don't want to deal with shitheads on the internet. But then also in online, it's like, okay, if your party doesn't fill, we'll fill it with AI players. And if somebody else drops in, then that player gets booted, right? So I don't know, maybe that's something that's coming down the road.
Yeah, I hope so. And again, this could be an early cut of the game, but for how much polish is in there, I would assume that it's pretty close to being done.
Yeah,
and I know it comes out soon, so I'm very excited to see that one. But V, thank you for spending some time with me today talking about our experiences this week. We'll see if more people want to hear your opinions. They can hear them anytime on stream, but I'm sick and tired of your opinions, honestly. So thanks for hanging out, man. And thanks in general. I guess all in all, the games were pretty fun, and there was a lot of different things going on in each of them that really brought out different opportunity for the gaming space and the future of gaming in PC gaming and on Steam as a whole. Thanks for watching.